Welcome to Analyst Talk with Jason Elder. It's like coffee with an analyst, but there's no actual coffee. Each episode, we interviewed an expert in the field of law enforcement analysis to share their career-defining stories and to get their insights on the world. Please join us on recognizing and learning from these brilliant minds as we define the law enforcement analysis profession one episode at a time.
Thank you for joining me. I hope many aspects of your life are progressing. My name is Jason Elder, and today our guest was a crime analyst for nearly 15 years. She is a former president of the Florida Crime and Intelligence Analysts Association. She's also a former professor at Tiffin University's master's degree program. She is currently an educational specialist with Esri. But if you've gone to a conference with the IACA and attended the opening ceremonies, chances are you heard her beautiful voice sing the national anthem. Please welcome Stacy Belledin. Stacy, how are we doing?
We're doing great. Jason, how are you?
I am doing great. I got a new microphone.
Sounding great.
Yes, I got the podcast up and running, and I'm talking to you.
Well, excellent. It sounds like a great day.
Yes. So let's talk a little bit about your current position with Esri as an educational specialist.
Sure. So believe it or not, I've been there for over 5 years now, which just slays me. Time is flying. But yeah, I've been there for about 5 years, a little over 5 years, and my role is as an educational specialist for public safety. And what that really means is that I'm there to help create and instruct different content that we have, but to write and instruct in the application of public safety. So public safety in what we do in Esri is not only law enforcement, but fire, emergency management, 911 call taking, national security. It could be site security for commercial businesses, all kinds of different things that you would think of for public safety. So I help author courses, and then those courses are either posted on the web. So we have an Esri training website that has web courses, self-paced training, or they might be instructor-led courses, and then I also help instruct those. So I have a couple different courses that are available to basically make sure folks in public safety are learning about GIS, which is a huge topic, right? It's not just for people in public safety, but GIS is for lots of different customers. You know, Esri software is deployed in more than 350,000 organizations worldwide. So that's a lot of different agencies and organizations, and it's not only public safety. You know, people such as retail and telecommunications and petroleum and insurance use GIS. But what I'm there for is to help provide the content that resonates better for folks that are wanting to learn GIS for public safety purposes, because I think that having classes that really help them apply in their real world examples and their real world scenarios helps it resonate better. And so then they know how to use the software for their specific purposes. So that is what I do at Esri.
So does Esri really have any competitors? It seems like you just mentioned it. Esri's everywhere, and they just seem like the top dog in the industry.
You know, I think there's always competitors out there, right? There's lots of different things. And even though, you know, somebody might think of themselves as competitors, you know, Esri is really out there to help provide and strengthen participation, sharing, and collaboration among agencies. So, you know, we do our best to help people advance and shape anything that they need to do in GIS. So we do that by, you know, trying to understand people's challenges and opportunities and help work together towards those viable solutions that you might have. And so, and we also are committed to making sure people are educated in GIS. So we help provide software in and out of the classroom. So we have more than 7,000 colleges and universities that use Esri software. So even during, you know, this time with the coronavirus, we have offered free software and e-learning resources to nonprofits, and then also furloughed professionals. So we just, regardless, we want to be able to help our communities use GIS. So that's what we do for our community.
How does it make you feel to work for such a large company?
It is a large company, but we're such a small company when it comes to how it feels, because we work together so closely. So, we may have a lot of employees, and I believe we have employees in over 70 countries. But, nowadays with some of the technology that we've been using, a lot of people, especially now that we're working from home during, this particular time, we have technologies such as, your Zoom and your Teams, and being able to collaborate. And so even though we may be large, it still feels like, I can talk to anybody about any issues that we might be having or any projects we're working on and work through those. And I don't feel it doesn't feel as large as you would think that most people would think a large company would feel like.
So talk a little bit about moving on from a crime analyst to an educator. And I think there's one video in particular hit YouTube a couple years back. I always think of you, and I think it was a dad that basically had his kids give him instructions on making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
Oh, it's the best video.
Yes, and they had to be very specific. He only did exactly what each step did, and you could tell. They didn't show the whole video step by step, but you could tell the kids were getting really frustrated because they had to go back and forth to him several times as they were writing the instruction for a peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
Exactly. So, we'll talk a little bit about, like where I came from with the crime analysis career, but just kind of, one of the things that I found that helped me a lot in my career as a whole is just learning a lot. And I did everything I could to take in whatever kind of learning I can, whether it was GIS. So I learned, the software that I currently use in my position, or if it was concepts and problem analysis, if it was tactical crime analysis, those kinds of things. I really wanted to learn. And so I went out and did a lot of learning. Because I worked in a larger agency at the time, I found myself doing a lot of train the trainers and making sure that everybody also had the same training. And I found that to be a lot of fun. So I like seeing when the light bulb goes off, when people are like, oh, that's why we use this application, or that's why we talk about it in this particular way. And so I really enjoyed being able to teach and being able to educate folks, especially in crime analysis, which is a profession that I love so much. So for me, I found that to be interesting, and I was already doing it as a crime analyst. And then, I get a call actually from some folks at Esri who were there at the time, John Beck, Phil Milkey, Chris Delaney, who were all former crime analysts as well, working for Esri. And they knew that I had a teaching background and felt that I would be a good fit for this particular position as an educational specialist. So I really enjoy it. I do miss being a crime analyst because it's always going to be part of me and it's always part of what I am. But I take a lot of, or let's say that I'm really proud that I can show people how they can do crime analysis, perform crime analysis using GIS. And they know the things that I did when I was a crime analyst.
So what is the expectation for someone who's never used Esri to being able to use Esri? Does that question resonate? Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, is there a set of courses or a set of weeks or a set of time that you've experienced that most people pick it up within this amount of time?
It's a good question. I think that, again, GIS is a big software, right? It's not just a software that is specifically for the crime analyst. It is for anybody who really wants to use geography and do spatial analysis. Like that's where it's really, really powerful, is being able to have that spatial analysis capability. So I think that there's definitely classes that you can take and you can learn, some fundamental concepts and the foundation of how you could use a GIS in public safety. and take maybe a 2-day course, maybe a 4-day course, maybe take a week. I think the issue is, though, it's just like anything else. If you don't practice, if you don't keep using it, then it's going to be hard to maintain, right? So, whenever I teach a class and I notice students are really getting it and they're really having a great time learning what they can do with the GIS, I say, make sure you go back and apply this to your daily work often, right? And I think that's one of the things that is a fundamental change that we need to see when it comes to folks, that when they think of crime mapping or they think of using maps in their work as a crime analyst, there are people who probably put together a map a month, right? They may do a monthly report and they get out, they bring in their data, they geocode it, they put it in, into their ArcMap or ArcGIS Pro, our newer desktop application. Or they might be using ArcGIS Online, which is another cloud-based technology we have. But regardless of what the technology is, they may make a map a month so that they can fulfill a report. But where the power is if you're using it on a regular basis, being able to find those trends and patterns, right? What we can do with data, what we can find with geoprocessing tools and spatial analysis tools, it can really, really make a difference in what we do in our work. I listened to one of your other podcasts the other day with Sally Taraba. And she talked about how she did some work with traffic analysis and how she used GIS in that. And, being able to just, find patterns and clusters in your data can really give you a place to start to do analysis versus kind of looking at a database as a whole. So it's just another, way that I would really like to see people use it kind of more often and incorporate it into their regular duties versus using it once in a while, because I think then it will resonate with them and they'll grasp it a little bit better than if they were just using it once in a while.
Are folks still geocoding, or is that a boomer term from old man elder? I was just I talked to Mark Stallo and Tony Berger, and we were been reminiscing about the old days, about how long it used to take us to geocode data and get it on a map and that whole process. Is most of the data now, does it come with location information so there's not that much geocoding anymore?
I would say that on a regular basis, you still geocode. However, it has become a lot less. So for instance, most of our modern records management systems that we're using that are out there nowadays typically come with an XY component, right? You're getting XY coordinates. And so it starts out, you might bring that in as either a spreadsheet or you might connect to your SQL database. There's a lot of different ways that you can bring in your data. You bring that data in and you can just display those XY coordinates. It's a lot easier than having to go through the geocoding process. And so many of those records management systems have that kind of data now where you're just displaying your XY coordinates and you're done. Have a nice day. With that said, as an analyst, you know that that's not your only data source, right? There's lots of different data that we might use. And so if it doesn't have a lat long or an XY, you still may have to do things like geocoding. So geocoding will never go away. But, Esri provides a world geocoding service. So we have an ArcGIS locator service, so you can use that. There are a lot of different geocoding services out there. I always tell people, check with your county GIS or your city GIS. They probably have an address locator that you can use. I try to, you tell people there's ways to make geocoding easier, but we definitely still teach it. Absolutely.
That's a good tip.
Yeah.
All right. Let's go back in time. Talk a little bit how the Indiana girl made it as a crime analyst at Jacksonville, Florida, and Lakewood, Colorado.
Oh, Indiana. I haven't been back there in a long time. But yes, born and raised in South Bend, Indiana. Go Irish.
Yes, go Irish.
Let me start by, I graduated with my undergrad with a criminal justice degree, not knowing what I wanted to do, because I also had taken a lot of music classes, a lot of credits in music, and almost went for a major in music, and then decided to go with something that was a little bit more stable, maybe. Didn't know if it was going to pay the bills.
Yeah.
So I thought about criminal justice. It was always interesting. And so I took an intro to criminal justice course, and it just resonated with me. The professor was great. The class was great. So I ended up with the criminal justice degree. Fast forward, I get done with school, and I had two places that I was interested in going to. I didn't want to be in Indiana any longer. It was cold. I needed to spread my wings a little bit. So there were two paths that I could take. The first one was to move to Florida. Why? I had just gone there for a vacation up north Florida to Amelia Island, thought it was really pretty. And the city of Jacksonville was near there. I'm like, hey, I could go there. I could find something. I don't know what, but we'll see what happens. Or I was going to move to Las Vegas, and I was going to be a lounge singer. Those
Wow.
were the two options.
That's quite a fork in the road.
Very, very different options. Needless to say, I moved into the Florida path, and I moved to Florida. I moved there after college, and I really wasn't sure what I was going to do. I had my advisor in college told me I should just go right into law school or get my master's degree right away, but I just wasn't ready to do that. I needed to do something else. So I moved down there. I started waiting tables. I waited tables ever since I was 15 years old in a family style restaurant. So I knew I could always make some money doing that. And lo and behold, as I was looking for jobs for waiting tables, I found an ad in the paper. And the ad in the paper was for a crime analyst at the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office. It said that they were looking for somebody who had a criminal justice or law enforcement background that was strong with computer skills. And it paid $9.13 an hour. So I'm like, well, let's see what we can do. So I applied and I got the job. So at that time, I think they only had 5 analysts and they were hiring 4 others. So it was myself and then 3 others were hired in at the same time. And that's how I became an analyst down in Jacksonville.
So then what did you get into case-wise or work-wise? What were some of your duties in Jacksonville?
So when I first started there, let me back up. So
Sure.
Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, just for folks that aren't familiar with that area, Jacksonville, Florida is a very large jurisdiction. It is about 840 square miles, which is large because it's a city-county consolidated government. So the Sheriff's Office was a very large agency, but because it was city-county consolidated, it has both the police department functionality. So it was a police department, but then it also did a lot of the sheriff's office functionality. So it had the jail, it had, corrections, all kinds of different things. So it's a really large agency with a lot of different functionality in it. And at the time, there was about 1,600 sworn officers. There's around, at that time, probably over about close to a million calls for service. And there was a lot of crime. Okay, so there's a lot to do there. And when I first got there, I wasn't really sure what it was I was supposed to do. But then, fast forward in time, I definitely knew it was what I wanted to do. And I thought that I really could make a difference in what it was. When I first got there, it was tough because I think, there were some analysts there, but I don't think that they knew what crime analysts should be doing at the time. It was still kind of new as a profession, at JSO at least. So, and we had a boss at the time that I don't think really understood what it was either. So kind of made it through for the first year or so, but I knew that there was something that needed to be changed. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a little bit. But fast forward a little bit to, that was in 2000 when I started. I wanted to go to a conference to learn more. So I convinced the boss that we should go to a conference. And so myself and then the 3 analysts that hired in with me went to our first crime analysis conference, which happened to be MACA, the Massachusetts Association of Crime Analysts. It just happened to be the first one that I heard of. And, MACA does a great job of marketing their conferences, right? So we went in 2002 and I got to meet a lot of really, really smart people. including a lot of the IACA board was there. So Christopher Bruce was there, Noah Fritz was there. I knew that we were kind of missing the ball in what we needed to be doing at JSO. And so it kind of lit a fire under me, at least, to really get involved with IACA and really kind of mix things up and see what I can do to try to get really good crime analysis going at Jacksonville Sheriff's Office. I then went to our first crime analysis conference the IACA conference in 2002. That was in Orlando, so we didn't have to go very far. So it was easy to convince the bosses that we didn't have to fly, so it would cost less money. And
there you go. Every little bit helps.
Yeah, and just as a sidebar, that was the first IACA conference I went to, and I've been to every one ever since. So
nice.
It's been great, and I've met so many talented people that I'm still close with, even that first conference. I remember going to the keynote session, or I think the opening remarks in the keynote session in the morning, like they usually do. And during that time, I was sitting with one of my coworkers, and there were some people next to me, and I just introduced myself. We started talking, and I'm still friends with them to this day, and that's Carolyn Cassidy and Erica Jackson from Gainesville Police Department at the time. So,
nice.
So I got really involved. I was really interested in what was going on. And then things started to change a little bit in 2003, and that was because, we had a new sheriff in town. And typically when you have new administration, you know, things kind of always get a little shake up, and we got a new boss. And that boss was Matt White. All right. Matt White came from Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department, which was a very progressive agency back then. And they were doing a lot of really good work. We had actually gone to get GIS training through an organization that was in Charlotte, and Matt was the teacher. So that's how he became involved with looking at what we were doing in Jacksonville. And then he ended up coming over there to be our boss. And then I think that's when we really started to flourish. We were able to do a lot more. It was an exciting time once Matt was there. So then I can see that what we were doing started to make a difference, and the good work started to shine through.
Okay, let's talk about the move to Colorado, and then we'll get into your badge stories.
I find it very similar to what Sean Bear was talking about when he's like, you know, why would I move to Colorado? That's really dumb. You know, thinking it was a big boondoggle. It's funny to me because he's the one that called me to move to Colorado. So he's talking about in his podcast how he would seek out analysts for his work, for his company when he was at Bear Analytics. And he necessarily didn't ask me to come work for the company, but he was taking an analyst at one of the agencies where he was really close to the chief. And he had told the chief, well, chief, I'm not going to leave you empty-handed. I have an analyst that I have in mind that would be great for your, you know, for this agency. And he called me.
Let's get into your badge stories. So you got two of them. Give me one, and then let me get some follow-up questions in there before you get into the other one. Does that sound good?
Yeah, of course.
All right, thanks.
The first one, I think, really helped not only earn my badge on, you know, getting things done with, say, officers, but also just how we were doing things as a unit, as a crime analysis unit. So when I first started at JSO, I remember the first week when we were doing training and we were talking about how we go about quote unquote analyzing crime, right? I was introduced to a stack of papers. And that stack was probably, 12 inches high. It was a stack of papers. And all those papers were reports. They were crime reports. Okay. And we were told that that's how we got our reports. All right. When I looked at those reports, they were electronic reports. They just happened to be printed out from
that hurts me.
The records management system that we had. And so I'm like, wait a minute. So you're saying that the officers are putting this information already into a records management system, but they're printed off for the analyst to use. Yep, that's how it works. Okay. So that was one thing that I was like, okay, why?
Yes.
Second thing is then it was up to us to then create, we basically took those reports and did data entry into various databases for different crimes. So there was a database for, say, residential burglary. There was a database for auto burglary. There was a database for robbery. There was a database for auto theft. And none of those really talk to each other unless you knew how to put them together, which I learned how to, but nobody else knew how to do that. And I'm like, why, again, are we doing these in separate places? Because we know that doesn't mean that there's different criminals doing different crimes all the time. It didn't make sense to me. So there was a lot of things that were just kind of backwards. We didn't understand why that was happening. And again, it really came back to that's how we were always doing it. And the supervisor really didn't realize that what we could be doing is looking at the actual data. So there was also, prior to this kind of constant, I don't want to say a battle, but there was definitely some heartburn between crime analysis and IT, right? So there's,
okay.
and you know, I've heard about this in many agencies where it's like, well, why do you need this? I don't understand. This is our data. We're gonna hold on to this. You don't need this. You know, what I did is I was doing my best to get that data entry in as fast as I could so that I can show them what kind of analysis is possible. And then also show, hey, you know, I could do a lot more of this because they were liking what I was doing. I'm like, we could do a lot more of this if we weren't having to spend hours a day basically doing data input to put in these reports.
Oh, okay.
And so I worked with our IT folks to get us basically direct access to an ODBC connection. And so they gave us a data warehouse. It was a replication of our data that we can then just query from and actually do analysis from. And from that day, I mean, we had to do some training because a lot of folks didn't know how to use some of the we use Microsoft Access as as our connection, and we had to do some training. But after that, people saw, oh, you guys really know what you guys are doing as a unit, not only just for me, but as a unit. And I think that was really important. So helping push that really helped earn our badge as a unit. So there was already some legitimacy there for we can do more if we had the data access available, right?
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure why. Well, I guess I do know why. It's just a lot easier on IT to just lock you down than to give you access. I fought that battle over the years, and I actually worked for places where they were purposely 2 to 3 generations behind on software because they didn't want to deal with bugs in the software. Like they wouldn't update to Office, the latest Office, until it was like 2 generations in. And like I remember, I was just like, well, I don't want to deal with Office 2003 where there's only 65,000 records in an Excel spreadsheet. I need 2007 at least, right? I mean, I'm not dealing with that. And that, it's just a lot easier to lock everything down, and then they don't have to worry about the black eye if some data got out or something made the agency look bad. There was a period of time where that was more the standard than the exception, unfortunately.
Absolutely. And I still hear stories today that has that kind of same issue. Less and less I'm hearing it. I think that there's definitely more of a legitimacy for crime analysis. I think people are seeing that crime analysis is an essential function in law enforcement. And in order to do that essential function, we need to have access to the data. So I think it's changing, but we still see it some.
Yeah, and I really actually think it's going to fast forward a little bit. With COVID, a lot of people were forced to work from home. So now all of a sudden, VPN has become to the forefront, and giving people access to work from home and be able to access all of that data that they would normally have to go to the office for.
Yep.
That's probably fast forward the idea of working from home 4 or 5 years now, because I think a lot of people just they just had to push it out and get it ready, have it there, and move forward. Yeah. So, all right, let's get into the other story then.
So the other story really has to do with just, I think everybody has, and you've talked about it in some of your other interviews on earning that analyst badge, that the one person, you just have to get that, get that person, and then everything's gravy after that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So mine happened to be where I feel like I had already proven that I can provide information, and I've worked on some cases that I was doing pretty good, mainly within, at that time, the robbery unit. So when I first started in there, we were usually assigned either a patrol division or some sort of crime type to specialize in, because there wasn't that many of us. So, and there was, we had 6 police zones, and then of course all your different crime types that might have a specialization. So I was part of the robbery unit, assigned to the robbery unit as an analyst. I was doing a lot of really good work in there, and I felt like part of that unit. Like they really thought I was doing well. The chief over crimes against persons, because we had like an assistant chief over that group, saw that I was doing really good work, but he asked me if I would be willing to help out the homicide unit. Now, homicide was always this, you had to get a key card to get in there. So it was secure. Nobody got in there. It was really like secret squirrel stuff. So they didn't like talking to people, and they didn't really have an analyst assigned up to that point. But I was willing to help. I'm like, sure, let's try it. So it was a really tough crowd. I started going, of course, to the roll calls. Nobody wanted to talk to me, and I told them I was available. Finally, the chief made one of the detectives, and the detective, I'm just going to call him the dinosaur. That's what they called him. Not, he just happened to be a veteran. He probably had over 30 years on at the time. They made him come talk to me on a case that really just didn't have many leads. He came into my office, and at the time, the office, it was a large room. We had kind of cubicles, but there were still pretty low partitions. And I could see him walking in, and he walked in with this hesitation, and he just didn't walk in. And he had come all the way to the back of the room in order to come see me. And he just sits down in the chair that I had at my desk, kind of with that humph kind of feel, and said, "Chief told me to come talk to you." I'm like, oh, this is going to be great. So I said, okay, what would you like to talk about? And at first, I just asked a lot of questions, and he would start talking, and then I'd ask a couple more questions and ask him a little more. And, after pulling information out of him, basically I took some of that information, found that the suspect in one of his cases had a nickname that was pretty distinctive, and then also a combination of different tattoos. And so I was writing a lot of notes down and told him, let me look at some things and see if I can find out some information, and I'll get back to you. So I started looking through some of the data we had. And by that time, I had already had some access to the electronic data. And the one thing is, yes, we got access to our police reports, but, JSO has a lot of other data because they're the sheriff's office. So they had a lot of jail data too. And that's a really rich data source, because when they come in, they start logging things like, your visitors. They log in all your marks, scars, marks, tattoos when you go into jail.
Mm-hmm.
All of those different things. It's really good, rich data. So I cross-reference some of that data with the tattoos in the arrestee database to some other data that I had. And then I found not only the tattoo, but then I cross-referenced that to some FIs that we had and found a name with that nickname. It ended up matching up. And so I gave him that name, and it ended up being the murder suspect. So
wow.
He was very, very happy that I gave him that information. Long story short, he ended up arresting him. He pled guilty. But after the arrest, at the next roll call, the detective, the dinosaur, got up and told the detectives, which there were 24 of them in there, what I did, and that I did a great job. And it kept me really busy ever since. Being able to, get the guys that have never really wanted to talk about it. They've been there forever. It took pulling teeth to be able to convince them.
You didn't have anything special access from what they had, correct? When I say they, the dinosaur.
I think they had ways that they can look at that. But the data that they're looking at is usually through a particular interface, right? So they might have to look at a screen. They may not know how to best search it. And if it is a tattoo, that is something that's kind of common. And if it's on an arm or whatever, they may not understand how best to start looking at that stuff. So they had some of that information available, but they may not know how to manipulate it and cross-reference it with other data the way that analysts can, right? Whereas I can take and do a query on the back end of all of that raw data and start searching for all iterations of how somebody might spell it because somebody could spell it differently. Cross-reference that with some of the other data that we have, and being able to use that and manipulate that data can help them narrow it down a lot better.
Because that's what you basically did. You narrowed it down to what? Like how many suspects, or what did you whittle it down to?
I think I had like 2 people. Once I got there,
wow.
It was only like 2 people. It was it was a pretty distinctive kind of like tattoo. And then the nickname was pretty simple, but the tattoos were pretty distinctive.
So after that, was your phone ringing off the hook?
Absolutely. Absolutely. But that's a good thing. I mean, you definitely get busier if you're proving that you can do well. I would argue though that you're going to stay busy even if, let's say, something doesn't work. It doesn't always work, right? There have been times where, okay, you're doing a forecast. Let's say you're forecasting. You have a bunch of robberies. I remember we had a robbery pattern once that was at, oh gosh, where was it? It was at AutoZones, right? AutoZone stores. I think they had somewhere like 18 armed robberies by the time they were done. We had gone and done some stakeouts, and I helped choose some places to stake out based on what I thought that they would hit next. All right, so doing some forecasting. I used things like some time of day of week kind of analysis, so your temporal analysis. I did some spatial analysis using ArcMap at the time. We did that kind of work, and I'm like, okay, based on this is where I think they're going to be. First 2 times we went out, they didn't hit. Okay. At that point, people can be like, well, this isn't going to work. And it doesn't always work. But you also cannot control everything. You can't control every variable. You can't control whether or not maybe that night that something happened, like they got a flat tire, or maybe that night they just decided they didn't want to go do it. They didn't want to go hit a robbery store, or they didn't want to go rob a store, right? So you can't control everything. But as long as you feel confident in the sound analysis and the fact that you're using reliable data, regardless of whether or not that forecast is successful, you should feel confident in that work.
Yes, but I think that's difficult.
It is very difficult.
Especially for newer analysts. And it was difficult for me. So when I was in that role, you were trying your best to predict that next hit. It's hard to be that confident, especially when you've never done it or not had that key case or earned that badge yet.
Right. And I think that's where communication is key. I think that I went into the meetings about the robbery pattern, and I had bulletins out, right? And the bulletins may have had those findings on it, but I also went in there and talked to them. I'm like, based off the analysis I did, it shows that this is the times that they were more likely, this is this, and I went through what I did so that they can understand where I come from. Nobody likes to be like, hey, they're going to hit here. How do you know that? Well, because I did some analysis, right? They want you to explain to them, or at least summarize how you went about doing that. And I think that gives them a little bit more buy-in, right? So it gives them that idea that, okay, then at least it's based on something. And that's what other, officers do the same thing. They have hunches. We're just doing it with analysis, right?
It's all about the data.
It's all about the data. So after, a couple times where I tried, I still kept going, and we ended up catching the 3 suspects, and they hit one of the stores that we did have staked out one night.
That's always a bummer. But yeah, you got them. Good job. Let's take a break. When we come back, I want to talk a little bit about your work with the IACA, and I want to get into your singing, of course. This is Analyst Talk with Jason Elder. We'll be right back.
Hi everyone, my name is Mindy and I am a writer for Analyst Talk with Jason Elder as well as a current crime analyst. My PSA for our listeners is don't compare your origin stories to others. I used to be super insecure when asked, why do you want to be an analyst or in law enforcement? And I always felt like I had imposter syndrome because I didn't have a good reason. I don't have any family members in law enforcement. I've never been involved in a crime, knock on wood. And I just felt like I had no good reason for being here besides just being interested in the industry. 6 years later, I still don't feel like I have a good answer, but I love my job and I'm pretty good at it. Passion or your calling isn't something that just hits you one day. It is something that's built and maintained over time, day by day, every day. If you're on the fence whether you're cut out for this field, just go for it. If you currently have no reason, make a reason. Make your own origin story. I believe in you.
This is Steve Gottlieb saying, never let failure get to your heart and never let success go to your head. Always stay humble because humility wears well.
LEA Podcast is proud to announce another podcast is now available on our website. Analyst Corner Podcast, hosted by Debbie Osborne, ran from 2008 to 2009. I highly recommend the episode featuring Brian Hill. Brian Hill passed away in 2018, and he helped me out tremendously when I was a younger analyst. In the episode, Brian gives some great advice, suggesting who you should take out to lunch in order to get access to better mapping data. To listen to all the episodes from the Analyst Corner, click on the link at the top of our website. That's www.leapodcasts.com. Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking with Stacy, and she was telling us about her experience as an analyst with Jacksonville Sheriff's Office. I want to switch gears now and talk a little bit about your work with the IACA. In particular, you were conference chair for several conferences. How has the conference changed over the years?
Overall, the conferences have really actually stayed the same and in a good way. And what I mean by that is that there's always been a model that's been followed where there's been. And I think one of the things that makes the IACA conference so successful is that it's everything that is done at an IACA conference is relevant to crime analysis, right? I think that there's a lot of conferences out there that people go to that they end up going to a lot of sessions and they're like, yeah, that didn't really apply to me. No, that didn't really apply to me either. So I think that people like all of the different things that we do at an IACA conference because it really does resonate. Everything from all of the different sessions that are picked. So I've been on 2 conference committees. One, I was the chair of the training side of it. So I helped choose the presentations and went through all of the different presentations, helped with keynotes and that sort of thing. So I got to see like how it is that we go about choosing different papers. And there's a lot of really good work that's being done out there by analysts, and they want to share their work. So, we have the call for presentations. That's still the same today. And then there are also, people that we invite to talk to analysts because we think they're doing good work or their work is relevant to what we do. And so they end up coming to speak. So I played that role one year, and then I was the conference chair. So over the actual conference in the 2006 conference in New Orleans. So that was actually a tough one. It was right after Katrina. So I don't remember if you went to that one. So that one was the year after Katrina. Yeah. So it was a smaller conference because we wanted to still go there so that we can help support New Orleans because it was just devastated. It was the year after, because I guess it was in September of 2005, and we were there in September 2006. Okay. And we had gone and done like a site visit in, I believe it was like March of 2006. Noticed it was coming back, And we really wanted to stay there, help them become great again, basically. So we had a smaller conference because I think there were a lot of people that were hesitant to come. But it was a very intimate conference. I feel like it was a time where a lot of people got to network because we got to meet a lot more people since it was a smaller conference. We also had a volunteer opportunity at that particular conference. That was a lot of fun because there was so much devastation in New Orleans. We had a day where we went out and helped with Habitat for Humanity. And after the conference, we went and actually helped build Musicians Village out in the 9th Ward. So that was a really wonderful opportunity. I would say about 20, 25 analysts were there. And I'll never forget that. That was such a great, great time.
And then you were chair of the International Symposium Conference.
So yes, I was involved with that. Yep.
So how is that, just for maybe those that don't know, how is that different from the normal conference, or what are some thoughts that you have with the International Symposium Conference?
So typically the international symposiums aren't as long as the conferences that we have for the annual training conference. And the training conference has always been held in the US, whereas the international symposiums we try to hold in various international places. So the first one that we did was in Canada, and I believe it was in Vancouver that we did that. Ever since then, we've tried to put it in different places. We've been to the UK, we've been to the Netherlands. So it's usually a 2-day conference or symposium. Still has a lot of the various things, but we again are trying to do things that help target an international community a little bit more. And it also gives people an opportunity that may not be able to come to our conference all the time. Maybe it's closer to some of their own regions globally.
And then you served on the IACA Global Census Committee. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I did. So back in 2008, we held, basically it was a survey. We called it the Global Census, and we did a survey to kind of determine, what does IACA look like, and to see if we can get, just a census of what the crime analysis community looked like. And so I, along with Tess Sherman from Austin, Texas Police Department, compiled a survey. So we created a survey and put it out there for IACA members. And we ended up having a 48% overall response rate, which is a very good survey respondent rate, and found out some really interesting things about that, about the crime analysis community. I personally would love to see plug the IACA do it again, because I'd love to see, number one, how it's changed, because since 2008, I know things have changed a lot, but it was a very interesting article that we ended up putting together to show some of the key findings.
Did you have a different survey each year, or it was the same survey over a 6-year period that you were collecting?
No, we just did this one time. This was a one-time survey. Yeah. So we only did this the one time. It put it out there, and I don't think they've ever done it again. So it would be really interesting to see this done again. We asked questions like, education, salary, what's the sex of crime analysts? What are we did all kinds of different things. Where are they coming from? So we looked at our international versus not, ages, all kinds of different things, just to see what they came up with. What kind of softwares were they using? What kind of databases were they using? Were they tactical? Were they strategic? It was very interesting.
Cool. Here's what I would want to do with that. I would want to get information about all the different people that each analyst has worked with, because I'm a name dropper. And you're doing a good job of name dropping during the show too. I want to give you some credit there too.
Hey, we're a team.
Yes. So, but what I'd want to do, what I've always thought would be interesting, is to have at the conference, have just this gigantic link chart, basically, where you put in your name and then you can see all the different nodes and connections to everybody else.
So basically the Kevin Bacon game, but for crime analysis.
Yes, yeah. And so then you go through, and there's some connections that aren't as obvious, like Like Sally Tarabaugh, for instance, we never worked together, but she replaced me at Cincinnati.
Sure.
And Mary Berticelli, I replaced her at Baltimore. So we have that kind of connection, even though we didn't actually work together. I replaced her. So there's just different connections like that I would really, with that data, is just find out all the different connections that people have.
That's fascinating. Yeah, I think that would be cool. And I think that would be interesting too, because like I said, I've been going to IACA conferences now since 2002. I have made so many lifelong friends from IACA. And I would like to just see, who are the people that you stay in contact with? Typically, all of us have started talking at IACA conferences because we were interested in what we were doing in our work. And I've always found it interesting that some of my really, really good friends, if not best friends, I've never lived in the same city as them, but we've been crime analysts together, and that's what really have brought us together.
Yeah, and I think it's that desire to push the profession.
Absolutely.
And to make it better, and to ask questions, and to go through this time where the profession's fairly new, that you can try to constantly improve the products. All right, let's move on to singing. I really want to get into your singing, because you told me that you started singing in 6th grade, but you had to know that you were a good singer before 6th grade, right?
Nope.
Really? You just woke up in 6th grade one day and just started singing?
I think so. I had a musical background. I started in 3rd grade playing the viola. And so I've always had an interest in music. As a matter of fact, my grandfather always played the harmonica. Like, it was just something in our family, and he loved music. So there was always music on in our house. And then in 3rd grade, I picked up the viola. So I never really focused much on singing. I knew I had an ear for music, but I never really sang much. Okay. It wasn't until 6th grade when I had a friend who also was playing in the orchestra with me, who was a dancer. She was going to audition for a musical. And I'm like, oh, that sounds cool. Maybe I can go and play in the orchestra pit or do something with the orchestra, because it was a summer theater for kids in 6th through 12th grade. So I'm like, that would be a lot of fun. It just so happened that my music teacher, he was going to be the musical director. He's the one that convinced me that I should be in the chorus and had me sing right then and there my first audition. And I was just shaken. My knees were just rattling, and I had to sing 76 trombones from The Music Man. And I just was terrified. And I couldn't do it. I clammed up, and he said, okay, everybody stop for a minute. He told me to come here, and he's like, I know you can do this. I've heard you sing. Pretend you're playing the viola and just sing it out. And I sang it out, and lo and behold, I sang out well, and he ended up casting me, and I was in the chorus, and the rest is history there.
Now, do you have to give yourself that similar pep talk every time you perform?
It depends. It really depends. I've sang at really large venues, and I've sang at really small venues, and it really depends on who's in the audience. If it's people I know, it freaks me out. If it's a big venue and I probably don't know anybody, then it's more anonymous and I can sing. It's no big deal.
So then you were in the Golden Garter Review in 1996. Let's talk about that.
The Golden Garter Review, it was a college production where basically up in Traverse City, Michigan, at a restaurant called Dill's Old Town Saloon.
I love it already.
Oh, yeah. And there was all kind of pickle themes. So it's Dill's. I loved it. They had a show that they did every summer, and they hired college students to come and perform. It was 6 nights a week, 3 shows a night for an entire summer. And we did all kinds of different things, pop tunes, jazz. We did a TV theme song medley. We did all kinds of different performing. And I had such a great summer. It was so much fun singing. Some of the people that I sing with are still in the business. One of them was a finalist on The Voice. So, wow. Yeah. So, I mean, and we're still, we still talk today. We just had, I think it was a 70th birthday of the owner who hired all of us. So we did a big birthday celebration for them. So it was great. But I really enjoyed that summer. It was one of the best summers I ever had. Just being able to perform on a regular basis was a lot of fun.
That's really cool. So, and this might be a tough question to answer, but when did you realize that singing wasn't going to be a career? You had talked about that fork in the road where you could have either gone to Vegas or you went to Florida. When you have your whole childhood dream of being one thing, to come to that conclusion where it's just not meant to be it's got to be kind of tough, right?
It is, but I think I always knew, like, as much as I wanted to pursue music and be a musician, be a performer, I knew that it was going to be difficult. I still have friends that are, in the business since college. There are days it's really hard. Gig work is hard. It's really, really difficult. Yeah. I was in college and I had seen some of my friends who had graduated a couple years prior try to do the go out to New York and make it, or try to go out to LA. And I just didn't want to end up being part of that cattle call all the time. I had other interests. Like I said, I thought criminal justice was interesting. I almost went pre-med too. Like, I have a lot of interests. So I just thought maybe there was something else that I can do as a backup and see how that goes. I just made the decision that it would always still be a part of what I do. It's just going to be a hobby. And I enjoy singing. I haven't been in a band in a while, but when I was in Jacksonville, I was in a band. When I moved to Colorado, I was in a band. I definitely have stayed involved in music at some point.
All right. Well, it's time to get a band back together then.
Oh, I love it.
So I would like to ask, if you would decide to go on either American Idol or America's Got Talent or one of these reality TV shows, and you're auditioning, what song would you pick?
Oh my goodness. So that's a really great question, because I actually, back in 2012, 2011, so several years ago, I auditioned for The Voice. So I have auditioned, and back then,
What was your song then?
I really struggled with what I should pick, because, you only get 30 seconds.
Sure.
30 seconds isn't long. And so I'm like, what's a good song that would just take you from 0 to 60 in 30 seconds? And I picked the song Fame. Do you know Fame?
Yes. But sing it just in case somebody else doesn't.
Oh my goodness. Fame. I'm gonna live forever. I'm gonna learn how to fly high. That song. I didn't start there, but anyway. And so I did that song, and I didn't make it. That's fine. Yeah. It was really a weird audition. Think of The Voice. I'm like, oh, blind auditions. This is really cool. But really, you go in and they put you in front of a bunch of producers and say, okay, thank you very much. And
So do you think you would stick with Fame, or since then you would pick a different song?
I would totally pick a different song now.
All right. Do you know what that would be?
No. I don't.
Note to self, give that question ahead of time so she could think about it.
I mean, there's a lot of stuff I like to sing, and I'm really digging some great artists now that are really strong female voices. I would probably pick one of them.
All right, let's talk a little bit about food, wine, and travel, because I know you're into
These
all that.
These are a few of my favorite things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So is there a destination that you have in mind, either maybe an upcoming vacation or something that you're really looking forward to that just deals with all three, food, wine, and travel?
Well, I would love to go back to Italy at some point. I love Italy. Spain is also one of my favorite places, and I've been there, and my husband hasn't been. So we've been talking about, at some point visiting one or both of those places so that he can see it, because he knows how much I love the two. I'm a huge fan right now of Belize. I love Belize. We went there for our honeymoon, and I've been there back since twice, and just find that cute little country. Just the water's stunning. The people are wonderful. The food is delicious.
It's unbelievable.
There you go.
Yes. I went on an IACA trip to Belize.
That's right. Yeah.
Yes. So yes, that was quite of an experience. Oh, it was like we were ambassadors. So it was fantastic. It was a really good time and important work being done. So it was a good time. But yes, Belize is fantastic.
Yes. I love it there.
What's your wine of choice right now?
I have been drinking a lot of Italian wines. I'm a big Italian wine drinker. I love Montepulcianos. I love Barberas. I love anything that's a super Tuscan, any of those kinds of wines. I don't drink a lot of white. I'm typically a red wine drinker, but I tend to favor wines that are a little bit lighter. So I like a Pinot Noir. I like those kinds of wines. I do like some Zinfandels as well.
Are you part of a wine club?
Just Stacy's Wine Club. That's
just
all.
Stacy. No, my wife signed up for some wine club, and it comes in at like 12 bottles at a time. So it's delivered right to the house.
I also buy 12 bottles of wine at a time. And I will not tell you how fast they go.
It is essential, right?
It is essential.
All right. Very good. Very good. Hey, well, I end every show with words to the world. And so I give you, the guest, the last word. So, Stacy, what are your words to the world?
I've had a wonderful career so far. And I think the reason I have done that and had such a great career is because of all the individuals I've met along the way at conferences and at training and at various meetings. So I encourage everyone to get out there and meet others. So learn from others experiences, and learn from other colleagues at other departments. So understand not just your department, but the crime analysis community as a whole. Because you'll not only grow as an analyst, but you might even have strong friendships that will last a lifetime from that.
Very good. Well, you've given me just enough to talk bad about you later. I appreciate your time. Thank you, and take care, Stacy.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us today on Analyst Talk with Jason Elder. We hope you not only enjoyed the show, but also learned something new. For more information on our guests and information relating to today's topic, please visit our website at leapodcast.com. Special thanks to the Rough and Tumble for our theme song. For more of their music, you can visit their website at theroughandtumble.com. Also thanks to Kyle McMullen for our show logo. For more of his design, please visit his website at moderntype.com. The show is hosted, recorded, and edited by Jason Elder and written by me, Mindy. You can contact us both via the LEA Podcast website. Please join us again next time as we interview another expert in this great field.